As halftime approached, you could feel the tension crackling through the tunnel like static electricity. One of the most intense quarters in Indiana Fever history had just concluded. However, things weren't quite as coordinated in the dressing room. With her jaw tight and her eyes like daggers, Caitlin Clark charged at the bench. With her clipboard in hand, Coach Stephanie White trailed closely behind and attempted to provide instructions above the din of the crowd. Then it took place. The intensity was evident even though the words were not captured by the cameras. Clearly irritated, Clark whirled around in mid-step and confronted fairly squarely. Even the assistant coaches froze in place as she shook her head, gestured to the court, and snapped something. It wasn't dramatic. It was genuine. This wasn't a showy meltdown by a diva. This was a top-tier rival who demanded leadership, independence, and transparency. Subscribe now if you want to see the unfiltered version of the story rather than the filtered one. You should absolutely subscribe if you plan to stay for the next meltdown. You can immediately see that Clark is not someone who sugarcoats things if you follow her career, from the crowded college arenas in Iowa to the record-breaking WNBA crowds. She plays with the zeal of someone attempting to change the rules in real time, and she is outspoken and straightforward. This was different, though, at this particular moment. It was more significant than a single poor quarter or a skipped rotation. It concerned the Fever's future and whether or not Caitlin Clark would be allowed to be herself in this franchise. To be honest, Clark didn't join the WNBA to be a supporting cast member. She didn't light up college basketball for 4 years just to be ignored or instructed to slow down so someone else could dribble the clock down. Fans are paying to watch her because of her style, which includes rapid threes, no-look passes, and speedy breaks that begin with a rebound. However, she has been treading carefully ever since arriving in Indiana. On the one hand, you have the traditional way of thinking, low-scoring slugfests, grinded-out possessions, and constructed setups designed to help veterans who have been in the league for 10 years. Coach White is at ease in the situation. She is not interested in 35-foot branding shots or ostentatious transitional crossings. She is here to maintain control, discipline, and run plays through the veterans. Conversely, up-tempo, chaos, pace, space offense, and creative flexibility are all part of Clark's vision for the game. She is revolutionary rather than careless. And she was screaming enough with her snap at halftime. One could say that it has been developing for some weeks. The miscuts, the delayed rotations, the plays in which Kelsey Mitchell dribbled into a contested mid-range shot as Clark was completely iced out. Clark's annoyance went beyond his feelings. It was calculated. The system is holding her back like sandbags on a rocket ship as she reads the floor 3 steps ahead. Everything had changed at the beginning of the third quarter. With a completely different attitude and fury in her eyes, Clark emerged. It was as if she were flipping a switch. She made 3 deep threes in less than 5 minutes, transitioning from playmaker to assassin. Coach White remained silent as the audience went nuclear and sat on the bench. It was obvious. The team had improved since Clark took command. The ball started to move all of a sudden. Colleagues were purposefully screening and cutting more forcefully. Opening up. At last, Natasha Howard, who had been stiff-arming the offense, began to flow with Clark's pace. Perhaps sensing the change, Kelsey Mitchell offered Clark a transition assist instead of pushing shots. As a result, the squad appeared to be a postseason contender rather than a mid-tier jumble after a 30-point quarter. Naturally, the press conference following the game was a maze. Coach White gave a typical response. "We changed things." Without acknowledging what had obviously happened on national television, the team said, "Well, it was a good second-half effort, no mention of the confrontation." She didn't dance around it, though, Clark. With steady gaze, she added, "We're trying to build something here. And sometimes that means having difficult talks because we want to prevail. My goal is to prevail. Interpretation: I'm not here to be polite. I am here to take the lead. And you know what? She's not incorrect. The Fever must give her the keys and move aside if they hope to prevail. She is more than just their top scorer. She is their best communicator, floor general, passer, and, ultimately, their best opportunity to develop a contemporary identity. The WNBA is changing. Speed, spacing, and star power are taking the place of the old techniques. Clark is everything and more. That change won't be simple, though. Veterans who believe they have paid more dues are still present in that locker room. There are still coaches who think that safety comes from organization. There are still those in the media who believe Clark's self-assurance is conceit. Here's the thing, though. Dynasties are not built on hesitation. They are built on vision, bravery, and allowing the culture to be shaped by your greatest players. And what's at stake here is culture. Play calls and stat lines aren't the only things involved. The question is whether the Indiana Fever are prepared to become the team that rides with Caitlin Clark into the future, or whether they want to be a team mired in mediocrity, a combination of old-fashioned tactics and veteran egos. The decision has been made by the fans. Her name is chanted in the arena. The merchandise is flying off the shelves. Every time the ball is in her hands, ESPN cuts to her responses. She is a revolution, not simply a novice. Every revolution begins with a moment similar to the halftime explosion, when the star finally expresses what everyone has been thinking aloud. It's enough. I'll run it. What transpired during halftime was merely a spark. However, a much larger issue is currently gaining traction. There is a simmering issue in Indiana and throughout the league. To be clear, Caitlin Clark wasn't simply speaking for herself when she yelled at her coach. She was speaking on behalf of all athletes who have ever been prevented from reaching their full potential by a system that is too inflexible. For every novice who is expected to follow orders rather than take initiative, and for every star who is instructed to follow orders rather than take the lead, there is more going on here than just a power battle. In women's basketball, a culture war between tradition and change is just getting started. Stephanie White is an example of a generation of coaches who used a one-size-fits-all playbook, discipline, and repetition to build their methods. To be fair, that strategy was successful in the early 2000s. When a league was battling for consistency and visibility, it worked. In the past, minimizing errors seemed to be the way to get credibility, but the 2025 WNBA is a different story. Fans demand more than simply effectiveness. They're looking for flair. Stars are what they desire. They want 30-foot daggers that light up Twitter in real time, as well as speed and attitude. They want to experience emotion once more. And Caitlin Clark consistently evokes that emotion. She is not a flawless athlete. She is not perfect. Even ardent admirers hold their breath when she takes heat check shots. You know what else she does, though? As soon as the ball comes into contact with her hands, she applies pressure on defenses. Before they arrive, she sees passes. She improves performance for opponents, teammates, and the league at large. And that's why this coaching conflict is so important. It has nothing to do with disrespect. It has to do with alignment. Caitlin Clark is currently performing like a generational star confined to a role-playing framework. Additionally, it is evident in the game's rhythm as well as in the body language. The offense falters as the tempo slows. Another possession dies in a corner, leaving Clark standing with his palms up. Furthermore, this isn't just one game, unlike what you might believe. There is a trend here. The gap between a visionary and an organization that is too cautious to keep up is slowly growing. Let's now discuss the locker room because the video transcript makes it evident that not everyone is prepared for the Clark era. This team has players, particularly veterans, who believe they should have the authority to make decisions. For years, Kelsey Mitchell, for instance, has been the face of the Fever. Additionally, the tension in her play is evident. The ISOs, the incorrect passes, and the inability to change Clark's tempo. It's generational rather than personal. Furthermore, this is not a problem exclusive to Indiana. Every time a young star joins a team with a large number of veterans, this occurs. Ego, pride, and the fear of being surpassed or replaced are all present. Here's the unsettling reality, though. The Fever must put vision ahead of comfort if they hope to prevail. And Clark is the vision at the moment. Adapting is necessary. When she calls for the ball, she must pass. This calls for coaching rather than restraining her. It entails focusing the system on her strengths rather than pushing her to change who she is in order to conform to someone else's. Additionally, a front office must cease playing both sides. Indiana is currently caught in the midst. Attempt to capitalize on the excitement Clark creates while simultaneously appeasing its veterans. However, that is unsustainable. If you don't invest in her generational talent, you run the danger of seeing her go after her rookie contract expires. Not to mention that Clark has choices. She is already well known throughout the world. She might leave Indiana and continue to dominate endorsements, merchandising, and headlines. However, if she stays, it must be because this team was created with her in mind, not the other way around. Let's also discuss how that altercation at halftime affected the league as a whole. That video went viral as soon as it appeared on social media. Podcasts, TikTok edits, and debate shows all present various stories. Some portray Clark as an unappreciative novice who defies authority. Some refer to her as a breath of new air since she at last demanded responsibility and guidance. She did, however, move the needle once more, something no one could dispute. This is when things start to get interesting. Because that type of cultural weight entails both opportunity and responsibility. Clark is doing more than just creating the character of her team. She is changing the discourse surrounding the coaching, coverage, and consumption of women's basketball. She is demonstrating that WNBA stars are capable of having ambitions, disagreements, and ideas. And that it's leadership rather than diva behavior. Consider how we report on NBA players. When Luka Doncic yells at Jason Kidd, we don't blink. We acknowledge that disagreement as a necessary component of fierce competitiveness. However, it makes headlines when Caitlin Clark follows suit. It's a scandal. It's disrespect. Clark is confronting the loud double standard. However, there will undoubtedly be opposition to that challenge. From coaches who perceive a challenge to their authority. From pundits who anticipate rookies will be thankful and quiet. From admirers who want her to stick to her own path. In actuality, though, she lacks a lane. She is constructing a roadway. The Fever are at last playing better basketball after that altercation, which is the most ironic aspect. The offense has become more relaxed. The speed has accelerated. Players are genuinely moving without the ball, and the team scores goals more effectively. It resembles a surprise. Your team is better when you have faith in your generational point guard. This is what will happen next. The Indiana Fever must have some difficult talks if they are serious about winning games, not simply tickets and clicks. They must determine whether Stephanie White is the best coach for this team's future. They must determine whether veterans who refuse to change should be a part of this core. Additionally, since nobody succeeds in limbo, they must provide Caitlin Clark with both freedom and support. Either you become the team that had her and let her go, or you empower your star. Because of Caitlin Clark's outburst at her coach, let's discuss the ripple effect. That was more than a Fever issue. The entire league received that televised alert. Coaches and general managers in WNBA locker rooms had to sit up and ask themselves one straightforward question. Will we be the next? Because when a player with Clark's prominence, stats, and brand equity seizes that kind of narrative control, it alters the gravity of the league. She's not only having fun. The power system is being rewritten by her. This isn't only about basketball, let's be clear. It has to do with branding, media, and attention economics. Every time Caitlin Clark enters a new city, jerseys sell out and ticket prices soar. Suddenly, cameras are sent by local news stations that haven't covered the WNBA in 10 years. She is the first athlete to move markets, not just basketballs, in years. Because the league and sponsors listen to her when she speaks, whether at a news conference or, yes, during a contentious halftime moment, she has some influence outside of the court. Take a look at the current packaging for the Fever games. They are receiving coverage during prime time. Suddenly, ESPN panels include the WNBA in their rundown. Not because the league's excellence was finally recognized, but rather because Caitlin Clark's presence makes it hard to overlook. Let's also discuss brand deals. Do you really believe that a rookie's proficiency with threes is the only reason Nike dropped a special shoe for her? No. Because Clark adds conflict and narrative identity, they decided not to forward with the deal. Marketers are passionate about three things. The explosion at halftime. Her brand was unaffected. It constructed it. It demonstrated that she isn't merely here to photograph and grin. Her goal is to prevail. And you can sell that plot. However, the Fever organization stakes are also raised by this. You now have a player who improves not just your box score but also the overall financial impact of your team. Not only are you failing her if you're not making the most of that, but you're also failing your partners, investors, and fans if you're using out-of-date sets that limit her potential. Speaking of fans, let's talk about the new audience that Clark is attracting. She's attracting casuals as well as diehards. College fans who have never seen a WNBA game are drawn to her. People who are more interested in vibes and statistics are drawn to her. This league has always deserved more attention, so it's not a bad thing. And whether they want to or not, Clark is dragging them in. However, new eyes also bring with them new expectations. People anticipate fast-paced drama, expressive players, highlight plays, and motion offenses. They don't want to witness 30-second shot clock grinds that result in forced jumpers or 17 consecutive post-ups. They desire speed. They're looking for flair. Additionally, they seek to empower their celebrity. For this reason, the Fever's current strategy seems out of step. You have a league that is at last gaining attention, and a group that consistently turns down the lights. That needs to be altered. Other players are watching what Caitlin Clark just done in Indiana, so let's pan out. Second-year forwards trapped behind veterans who are unable to pass, and young guards on rebuilding teams. They are observing Clark's voice usage and the reactions of her franchise. There will be a new wave of player empowerment if the Fever backer, the offense, and the coaching are all changed. Other stars will begin to make system demands because they know they can, not because they are conceited. Clark simply demonstrated that it's feasible. However, the Fever will create a risky precedent if they disregard her and bury her skill in poor spacing and antiquated play calling. It would be a huge lost opportunity for the NBA if it told other rookies to stay quiet, stay small. Because this is the reality. It is not true that Caitlin Clark is a unicorn. She is the first of many. There is a full pipeline. There's a wave coming. Guju Watkins, Paige Beckers, and Hannah Hidalgo. Furthermore, these ladies won't pretend to be pleasant in order to get favor. They grew up witnessing LeBron make the decisions in Los Angeles. They have witnessed Steph Curry revamp an offensive scheme. They recognize that systems are shaped like stars, not the other way around. And the WNBA must decide. Either change with them or you run the danger of losing them. Not only in video games, but also in society. Now let's discuss Coach Stephanie White once more. To analyze, not to criticize. She's a good coach. She is a first-season character. However, that can occasionally be the issue. Decades-old coaches frequently rely on what worked in the past. When they see fast-paced basketball, they imagine mayhem. They think without discipline and perceive logo threes. They perceive insubordination when they witness athletes barking during huddles. However, the development of leadership is what they are lacking. Ego had nothing to do with Clark's halftime tantrum. It has to do with urgency. It was about saying, if you let us, we can win. Leadership is that. Yes, messy. Yes, it's emotional, but it's genuine. And they will continue to lose the locker room one star at a time if White or any coach is unable to accept that fact. This is something that hasn't been discussed enough. A Fever season might have been saved by Clark's confrontation. In certain cases, things must break before they may be repaired. The calm section must occasionally be spoken aloud. That's what Clark did. Everyone was already experiencing strain, which she revealed. And now that the organization has no more justifications, there is a way forward. They've witnessed the results of leaning into Clark's style. 99 points are awarded to you. You are given space. You experience fluidity. You achieve outcomes. What will they do with that information, then? Put it under the rug. May eventually create a system that gives her complete control. Whatever decision they make will determine this franchise's future for the next 3 years. Here's the worst part. Perhaps it won't be during a game the next time Clark loses it. Stars don't wait forever, thus it could happen during the off-season, at a contract meeting, or during a trade demand. Not in the game today. Not when they are aware of their value. Not with everyone looking on. You're seated by the court. It's an electrifying audience. The cameras are in motion. And then, as halftime approaches, bang. There is a surge of tension. It goes beyond simple disagreement. It's more than a simple misunderstanding. It's a confrontation. The face of the emerging WNBA, Caitlin Clark, is yelling at head coach Stephanie White. And everyone in the league is observing. It doesn't seem like a unique moment. It seems to be the result of weeks or even months of increasing pressure, missed potential, and an attitude that is so incongruous that they could just as well be participating in 2 other sports. This isn't just about one game, let's face it. Identity is at issue here. Who is in charge of the Indiana Fever? The phenomenon. Rewriting the rules, or the old guard sticking to structure? Whispers are evolving into candid discussions behind the scenes. According to league insiders, Clark has made numerous attempts to speak up at team meetings. Faster tempo sets have been pitched by her. She has provided input on player spacing and rotation. She has pointed out the obvious inefficiencies in the team's transition response and, for the most part, crickets. According to sources, the frustration peaked when Coach White benched Clark for a crucial possession in the 4th quarter of a close game. It was supposedly for relaxation. However, as her team struggled on offense once more, spectators witnessed Clark clenching her jaw, crossing her arms, and avoiding eye contact. Is this the start of a full-fledged revolt? You can't help but wonder? This is where it becomes even more juicy. The idea that Clark is not alone is becoming more and more apparent. Younger athletes, rookies, and second-year students who grew up witnessing her dominance at Iowa are subtly supporting her goals. They want more ball movement, less ISO play, a quicker offense, and greater faith in analytics-driven contemporary basketball. According to reports, one assistant coach confided in a coworker, "We are attempting to drive our 21st century Ferrari like a Buick from the 1990s. Stephanie White is not being disparaged by that. Although she is a reputable basketball expert, there is no denying the disparity in style. The Fever's pace puts them close to the bottom of the league. When Clark is given the opportunity to take control, you blow up offensively." The figures seem to be shouting what Clark is too irritated to express aloud. The dynamics in the locker room, however, are chilly. In one instance, Clark confronted a colleague following another transition opportunity that was lost. According to reports, the teammate retaliated. "On this team, you are not alone." The vibe changed. The eyes darted. The room was tense. That was a pivotal moment. There was a silent division between those who stubbornly held onto their seniority and those who welcomed Clark as a future. A 99-point offensive explosion against the Dallas Wings with silent detractors would be expected. However, no. It was dubbed a fluke by several observers. Clark's stat inflated, according to others. Watch the tape, though. When she sets the pace, it's indisputable. In addition to looking like a playoff club, the Fever appear to be enjoying themselves. With rookies like Victoria Saxton and Lexi Hull, the chemistry has grown. Fast judgments, unrelenting tempo, and off-ball movement. It's the type of basketball that floods highlight reels and fills stadiums. And that's strategy, not simply hype. The scenario is equally charged off the court. Although Clark's camp has maintained its professionalism, nervousness is rising in private. They're not requesting preferential treatment. Common sense is what they're requesting. A generational point guard is the foundation of the system. not because of one. The notion of a coaching change has been floated by some media outlets. Would the front desk actually take that into consideration? Would they have the courage? Stephanie White is still supported by the Fever in public, but pressure is building in private. There is an increase in attendance. The merchandise is flying. At last, the team is receiving national attention. Do they maintain the momentum or allow internal resistance to cause it to stall? Additionally, there is a fan base that is more active, vociferous, and divided than before. Loud and devoted are Clark's supporters. They contend that she is more than just the Fever's face. She is the league's future. They're not incorrect. Every time she takes the court, TV ratings rise. Like no one since Sue Bird or Diana Taurasi, she has brought the WNBA into the mainstream. However, her detractors claim that she is very demanding, that she ought to wait her turn, and that she must prove herself before taking on a coach on national television. Let's be honest. That criticism smells like dread. Aversion to change. Aversion to the novel. Concern that the weight of unquestionable star power is causing the previous structure, which was based on tenure and status quo, to crumble. In such discussions, Paige Becker's name keeps coming up. Despite her calm efficiency, quiet strength, and coachability, Clark didn't simply outscore her when they faced off. She was in charge of the game. Becker's is amazing. However, Clark is transformational. However, their rivalry is still in its early stages. Becker's post-game interview was calm and collected, but it also had a hint of edge. She said, "They got us today. However, we'll meet them once more." There was a simmering determination that promises fire the next time, but no hostility. Fans, well, they're prepared. Becker's versus Clark might end up being the league's most iconic rivalry. Built on intelligence rather than stake. Two distinct legacies, two distinct archetypes, are being written in real time. Now, back in Indiana, the Fever front office must make a crucial decision. Support their coach and run the risk of upsetting the player who is making them famous, or reorganize the system to provide Clark with the assistance, autonomy, and contemporary framework she requires to succeed. They are unable to do both. The fence is vanishing. Half measures are no longer appropriate. In actuality, this meltdown was more than just an emotional outpouring. In the sand, it was a line. Caitlin Clark is weary of making concessions. "I'm sick of being held back. I'm sick of being polite only to control my ego." Her desires are straightforward. To prevail. To take the lead. To carry out her routine. Modify the game. Perhaps, just possibly, this explosion served as the team's catalyst. Because sometimes the dead weight needs to be burned away with a little fire. One thing is certain, Caitlin Clark is done waiting, regardless of what occurs next. Whether White adjusts or leaves or Clark must endure another season of philosophical misalignment. And the WNBA, things become even more intriguing.